Welcome to the Chart of Truth, aka the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg, Layer 7. This is going to be Layer 7 of a nearly 30 layer iceberg. So I have around 7 other parts going over layers 1 through 6. If you want to go check those out after this video, you don't really have to start from the beginning unless you really want to. But today we are starting on Layer 7. But before we get to that, I partnered with MyHeritage to bring you today's video. With the MyHeritage DNA kit, I was able to learn all about my family tree and even connect with some family members that I didn't even know existed. Taking their test is extremely simple. You swab both sides of your cheek, you break the cotton swab into this vial, and then you just send them on their merry way using the provided shipping bag. Then it's just time to wait at home for your test results to come back in. MyHeritage estimates it can take around 4 to 6 weeks, which is about right. Mine came in around I would say right under a month. I was able to get my test results back, and when I did, I found out that I was overwhelmingly Mesoamerican and Andean, which from what I've been able to gather just means I'm Latino. But you know, any ethnicity from the Central America area can get kind of complicated, but other than that, for me, the coolest part personally of MyHeritage was being able to link with other people. For example, the instant that I got my test results back, I already had messages flooding in from possible family members, and I had this specific person whose name I have to black out for this, reaching out for questions regarding his son's DNA because apparently we matched. And what's so cool about this is now we all get to collaborate and figure out our family tree together. MyHeritage has a promotion going on right this second. Go ahead and click the link in the description and use code THEORIST for free shipping. And as an added bonus, you can start their 30-day free trial of MyHeritage's best subscription service for family history research. And you'll even get to enjoy a 50% discount if you decide to continue it. Learning about your family's history has never been easier, so a humongous thanks to MyHeritage for partnering with me on today's video. Now with all that said, let's get started on the first item on Layer 7 of the Chart of Truth iceberg. Doveland, Wisconsin. There exists an urban legend originating from Wisconsin, specifically Doveland, Wisconsin. Whether it be a Mandela effect or something similar, there are people that do remember a small town in Wisconsin named Doveland, and they believe that this town somehow disappeared in the 1990s. The evidence for this legend is the fact that a few people claim to own t-shirts and souvenirs that are from the town, while others claim that they have either lived there or they know someone who did. However, nothing outside of word of mouth exists as tangible proof. There was one big lead in the case that convinced a lot of non-believers in Doveland, Wisconsin, and it was the fact that if you Googled it, Google had this autocorrect feature that could sometimes suggest the term Doveland, Wisconsin, leading many to believe that Doveland must be a real place if Google is suggesting it. There are also a ton of other theories surrounding this place, some people saying that it's a hoax, others suggesting that it's a real town destroyed by the government in order to hide science experiments that have gone wrong, or simply that town just quite literally disappeared over time due to low population efforts. 2006 Volleyball Incident. Have you ever heard of the school shooter that massacred a high school volleyball game in 2006? Most people have not, but there are a lot of people who distinctly remember this specific event happening. And it certainly sounds real off the bat with the amount of school shootings that are thrown in the media nowadays. But there are a few details with this specific one that get muddled depending on who you ask. But I would say from the sources that I've read and seen, the generally agreed upon story is that insert a low population US state here, and in that low population state, during a girls' high school volleyball game, a person walked in with a firearm and took at least 20 people's lives. That number seems to fluctuate depending on who you ask, but people were claimed to have died at the very least. And the aftermath of this entire situation is said to have just generally been swept under the rug. And not because of some crazy conspiracy, but just because no major mainstream media outlet picked up on this story. And for those wondering, what about all of the people in that area that probably would have heard about it on the local news? Well, just like humans do, we all end up forgetting things that just aren't directly tied to us. There's so many things happening in the world that it's entirely possible that this one event just kind of slipped under the rug for a lot of people. So now that's all that remains of this story. A story without any physical, tangible evidence. At least that's what I thought. So I ended up finding 2 sources mentioning this incident, or something similar to this incident. The first one comes from this website, schoolsecurity.org. This is just a list of school-related incidents that were fatal, either involving school shootings or school violence, and I managed to find this incident from October 5th, 2006 in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, where a male was shot by a 17-year-old after an altercation at a concession stand during a high school volleyball game. And this story hits a lot of the main points of the 2006 volleyball incident. It takes place in a low population US state, the kind where people that don't live there or don't live near it will probably forget that it exists. And it also takes place in 2006 during a volleyball game. The only problem is there wasn't multiple victims like the original story says, and not even near the claimed number. But could this be it? Because the victim in this case was shot, which still matches the story to an extent. This could be the case where a lot of people told this story over and over again, and it just slowly got exaggerated over time. And seeing as it's not like a big mainstream media headline news story, this does seem very likely. The other source mentioning the 2006 volleyball incident comes from this website titled Above Top Secret, and there is this thread that exists of conspiracies you've never heard of. If you go to page 2 all the way to the bottom, someone mentions the 2006 volleyball incident, stating this: "Here is something I came across recently that is just a prank, but it's a cool idea / story. The 2006 volleyball incident. Supposedly there were multiple school shootings on a certain day in 2006. The attacks all took place in tiny towns with very small populations during high school volleyball games. The attacks were then erased from public record, and only a few people remember them happening." This post leaves you with the impression that this story is just a hoax that was used by people over and over to score cool points. Like, I don't really know why you would want to spread this story, but it doesn't seem there is a real explanation for why someone would just randomly come up with this. I think it's far more likely that the Ohio incident and the Ohio story is what span out of control. But let me know your thoughts below, because this is one of the ones that's just truly up in the air. Cat nuns. This one should really be called the meowing nuns, because that's what this case was. Dating all the way back to the Middle Ages, there exists a peculiar incident of contagious meowing. Much like the dancing plague, there was a group of nuns that just could not stop meowing. One of them started, and then slowly over time, a bunch of other nuns started joining in, creating this group of nuns that just would continuously meow like a cat. And this story originates from a book titled The Epidemics of the Middle Ages, published in 1844. There is this one section, this one tiny section about the meowing nuns. And here's a translated version of the piece that I'm talking about. "I have read in a good medical work that a nun in a very large convent in France began to meow like a cat. Shortly afterwards, other nuns also meowed. At last, all the nuns meowed together every day at a certain time for several hours together. The whole surrounding Christian neighborhood heard with equal jargon and astonishment this daily cat concert, which did not cease until all the nuns were informed that a company of soldiers were placed by the police before the entrance of the convent, and that they were provided with rods, and would continue whipping them until they promised not to meow anymore." Basically, if that just seemed like a jumble of words, these nuns meowed so much and frustrated so many people nearby and got on the nerves of the nearby soldiers that the soldiers basically began abusing them and hurting them in order to shut them up. This story has been chalked up to mass hysteria, seeing as it's in a book full of other similar events. The part where people made this story go from just sort of strange to just evil is when they started associating the meowing with some sort of demonic source. And this is because during the Middle Ages, cats were seen as evil and demonic. And it's obviously with the nuns, being involved in religion, it's very easy to see how that association formed with them meowing being associated with demonic purposes, believing that the meowing could possibly be a part of a dark ritual of some sort. Dwarves' secret society. Most Google searches for this led to random posts about Dungeons and Dragons because dwarves are a race in that game. But one lead that I found while researching this comes from a strange forum titled the Odin Brotherhood Forum. This appears to be a forum dedicated to the Odin Brotherhood that was popularized by Mark Mirabello in his book by the same name. The Odin Brotherhood appears to just be a secret organization like many of the other ones that we've seen, but this section isn't on them. It's on the Dwarves' secret society. The reason I brought up the Odin Brotherhood is because the answer that I was given for this topic was found on their forum, obviously. So I feel like to give full context, I would have to explain them. So on the forum, there is a post about dwarves, and it basically states that dwarves are pitch black in appearance and they live underground in a labyrinth with complex mines and forges. But other than this one answer that I found online, I didn't really see any real posts going over this topic or any real articles or anything going over this topic. At first I thought maybe this could link to the Kagits, which was another earlier entry, and maybe it was going over how some of the Kagits formed a secret society that people nicknamed the Dwarven Society because of their short stature. But that doesn't really appear to be the case either. If anyone knows anything about the Dwarf Secret Society, let me know, and I'll make sure to include it on the next video. Interdimensional Bigfoot. One problem that always comes up with fabled creatures like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Jersey Devil, and other infamous alike entities is that no one can ever take a solid, good photo or video of them. One explanation that has been proposed to solve this gaping hole in these stories is that these beings are not normal beings like us that are locked into one dimension, but rather they are interdimensional travelers that can move from one dimension to the next, which would explain why they aren't seen and why sightings of these creatures are extremely rare. That is essentially what interdimensional Bigfoot means, and we'll talk about this later on down in this specific video. I'll bring it up again, but yeah, that is the core idea behind interdimensional Bigfoot. There are no forests. Let's take a look at this photo. What you're looking at is a mountainside, but notice its striking resemblance to that of a tree stump. Well, because of mountains that look like this, there are a group of people that believe mountains aren't really what we believe they are, and that the trees that make up these forests are also not what we've been led to believe. What if this mountainside that we are looking at is really just a humongous tree that has been cut down to this small stump, and the trees surrounding it are simply saplings sprouting out from the ground? By the way, this picture is taken from the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, USA, but that's just one piece of evidence that believers in this theory use when writing pieces or making videos on the so-called real forests that have been stripped away from the planet. You see, believers in this theory think that the earth was way bigger than before. They think that the forest and the trees that we see right now were like infinitely like times their size. They think that they were the size of like buildings, and that everything that we see right now is just a smaller version. And the explanation given for why we have such a small version nowadays is that some cataclysmic or crazy catastrophe wiped away all of the bigger rocks, the bigger trees, the just bigger landscape areas, and now we're left with these things that we think personally are huge areas, but are actually kitty-sized forests. Now, while I personally do not buy this theory, I do like the concept. I like the concept of looking at something that is so commonplace in today's society and actively thinking about it outside the box, because thinking that way is what's led to many innovations and discoveries that could be very beneficial to us. So whenever you're out on your walks or your drives to school, or you're sitting down somewhere and you're looking at stuff, question it. You never know what you might end up discovering. Bouvet Island Lifeboat. Imagine for a second that you were tasked to go to one of the most isolated islands on the planet. And when you got there, there was a mysterious sign of life that someone else had been there before you. Well, that's exactly what happened when people went to visit Bouvet Island in 1964. The South African expedition, when they went during that year, discovered a mysterious lifeboat that was left on the island. And what's weird about this lifeboat is that it looked as though it was pulled onto shore. Like someone went behind it and just somehow pushed it onto the island. It wasn't just floating around in the water. So people have questioned, like, how is this possible? Because this island is one of the most isolated islands, and getting to it is not easy. There was one promising theory that I found thanks to a Reddit post about a ship called the Slava 9. I might be mispronouncing that, but that's what I'm going to call it. But anyways, this one's promising because it's one of the last boats to explore Bouvet Island before the South African 1964 expedition. In that Reddit post, it references a book titled The Transactions and the Oceanographical Institute. And because of this book, we might have some concrete proof as to what boat is on Bouvet Island. But before we get to the proof, I have to explain the context. So in 1958, the Soviet Union sent the scientific vessel known as the Slava 9 as part of a regular Antarctic fleet. I'm assuming, based on the reading, that they would regularly send out these ships to explore Antarctica, and during this specific voyage, on November 27th, the Slava 9 reached Bouvet Island, and that's where we get to this photo. This is an excerpt from that book, and specifically a screenshot taken from the end of the section on the Slava 9. In this section, which I translated using a website that can translate text from images, we can see it says the boat and its crew were on Bouvet Island for 3 days before they are managed to be removed by helicopter on November 29th. That they did not leave the island by boat, but instead were rescued by a helicopter because of how bad the weather conditions were. They basically had to leave the boat in order to live, and a random boat was then just left on Bouvet Island, and it could be the answer to this mystery boat that was found just a few years later. I think the only hole in this explanation is the fact that the Bouvet Island lifeboat was explained to be on shore instead of like just floating around in the water, which, I mean, it could be possible if, you know, over time the boat just slowly washed ashore, because from the Slava 9 expedition to the 1964 one, that's around like that's a pretty long gap, and I'm sure over those years it could be possible. But again, this is not a concrete explanation, just a close enough answer for those anxious folks out there like myself to get some closure to this mystery. Prison planets. Have you ever thought about how unfair life can be? Like how sometimes it feels like bad people are just handed everything while all the good people are punished. Some have taken this idea and ran with it, using it to fuel this conspiracy, believing that Earth is a prison created by extraterrestrials or otherworldly beings to trap humanity because of something that we did. That something is not really explained. It's just assumed that we did something so catastrophically bad that we've been basically banished to this other world. And now we live on a prison planet that is led by distress and chaos, with many believing that this is why the world works the way it does and why we have so much screwed up systems. Some evidence that is constantly pointed to when talking about this theory is the fact that we don't have any concrete evidence of aliens existing. It's all just speculation, stating that it's because they do not want to associate with us because of what we did in past years. And therefore, that should be the reason as to why we have no contact with the outside world. China's real population. If you go onto Google right this second and type in what is China's population, you will be told that there are about 1.41 billion people living there. However, this appears to be a discrepancy, or at least one man believes so. There is a website known as projectsyndicate.org, and it has an article by Yi Fuxian explaining that China's official demographic of their population is way overestimated. Now, originally in this theory of China's real population, people believed that China was lying about the 1.41 billion people and that they had less than a billion, like closer to like just less than a billion. The numbers always change from like 500,000 to like 700 million, but basically people didn't think they had even a billion people living there or born there, and that China artificially inflated the numbers to 1.41 billion in order to seem like a bigger power in the world. And this guy Yi Fuxian appears to have data that says otherwise. Now, I'm going to be honest for a minute. I'm being extremely transparent. As someone who tries their best to research basically whatever I can when researching these topics, I was so overstimulated looking at these charts. Like the charts that the guy linked, I'm just so lost. So I'm just trusting that what he wrote in these photos and these pictures are somewhat based in facts. A lot of people seem to think so, but let's say for a moment that this guy is right and that somehow he got a hold of leaked information regarding China's population. What would be even scarier going forward is the fact that this data is from a few years back, which means it's not even concurrent with the post-pandemic birth rates, which would have definitely negatively impacted the population size of China. The main takeaway here is that China is just artificially inflating their numbers, and in reality they've been on the decline for quite some time. At least that's what people like Yi Fuxian believe. Memphis Rap. Memphis is a city in Tennessee, and it's the birthplace of what's known as Memphis Rap. This style is known for its use of really bad and old equipment and simple beat loops to create a really dark and evil atmosphere that you can feel when you listen to the music. Add in the fact that most of the pioneers of this style used lyrics and stories surrounding violent and satanic imagery to create what would become the blueprint for what's known as horrorcore rap. The full timeline of this is that Memphis Rap is created, it exists, and then some years later, through a game of telephone on 4chan, some people came to the conclusion that 8 original cassette tapes of songs from various groups in the genre contain the energy and souls of murdered individuals, and that if someone were to get a hold of these tapes and listen to them in person, it could have dire effects on just them, and they would see some real scary and evil stuff. Ural Relief Map. A stone known as the Dashka stone was discovered in the Ural Mountains of eastern Russia in 1999. This slab is believed to depict a map, with the cracks in it making up the separation lines of established areas. It's strongly suggested, because of the accuracy of this map compared to areas like Bashkiria, a specific area of the Ural Mountains, that this has to be artificially made. A lot of people seem to believe that this is just a hoax and that it's artificially created. But the crazy part is that the material that it's made out of shows that this is essentially millions of years old, leaving many to question how it's possible that people from millions of years ago could have managed to create something with such pinpoint accuracy, implying that it must be proof of extraterrestrial intervention or something of that sort. Bitcoin created by banks. This one is pretty self-explanatory and mainly stems from the fact that the supposed creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, has never been discovered and has never even touched his entire share of Bitcoin, leading people to think that Bitcoin was created by big banks to have another form of currency to fall back on because they foresaw the entire decline of physical money, leaving them in control of the next big currency. That's pretty much it for this one. There's not really much else to talk about, but it is strange to think about because Satoshi Nakamoto did, if you look at the blockchain information, I think that's what it's called. I'm not really well versed in Bitcoin, but I'm pretty sure if you look at the public information available, yes, Satoshi Nakamoto has never touched his share of Bitcoin, and it's a little strange that no one's ever heard of this guy. So I kind of buy this a little bit. I don't know if it's the government, but it's definitely weird at the very least. Highway trolls. I'm sure we all have a weird story of driving home at night when we suddenly feel like we just saw something dive into the darkness beside the road that we're on. Apparently, this is an unofficially recognized phenomenon that some people have explained as humans simply seeing cryptids, like the ones that I've mentioned before, the Jersey Devil, Bigfoot, etc., etc. But some have decided that these big shadowy figures that we see on the highway are actually big troll-like creatures. And these creatures might only come out specifically at night because they're trying to catch us at our most vulnerable times. Because, you know, for example, you usually drive home at night after a long vacation trip, a big party, or, you know, you're just visiting someone that lives very far from you. This also ties into what I was saying earlier about interdimensional Bigfoot. People believe that these creatures are possibly manifesting themselves for a moment and then disappearing into another dimension. Psychotropic warfare. Psychotropic is defined as drugs that can affect a person's mental state. So if you pair this with the full phrase psychotropic warfare, we get to the idea of super hallucinogens such as one that's simply known as BZ being used to affect enemies during times of war. And if we have access to these types of hallucinogens, what's stopping big government from using them on us, the population, and slipping them into our food and water supplies? Because the scary thing about those kinds of drugs like BZ is the fact that they have after effects that last weeks at a time. And this kind of ties into the whole government is trying to control the population. This is just one of the many proposed ways that people think the government could be going about that. OOO School of Thought. A book by Graham Harman is titled Object-Oriented Ontology, a new theory of everything. And that's what led me to this explanation. I think the best way to explain this theory, though, is through an analogy. People that are fans of explanations of the fourth dimension will kind of already know this. And yes, before people comment it later, I am stealing this explanation from this video, but rather than play the full 9-minute video for you, I'll just give you the abridged version. If you want to look at the actual video, I'll have it linked in the description. So let's look at this bag, right? Imagine looking at the side of this bag, this flat line. I don't even know how am I gonna hold this? I'll do it this way. This flat line, imagine this is one plane of existence where the crease is, where this big crease is. That's one plane of existence. If you were to live on here, you can only go two directions. You can only go front and back, right? But if you lived on a two-dimensional plane, right, you could now go front and back and up and down. So for this person, if we put an obstacle right here and they reached it, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They would have to push this obstacle out of the way to keep going forward. But if you go into 2D world, if the 2D man reached this obstacle, they could just hop over it or just climb on top of it, right? And they could just keep walking. Now, to the one-dimensional person, to the 1D man who is on this plane of existence, they're on the extremely flat plane of existence, right? They would simply see 2D man pop out of existence and then pop right back in. And that's because they're on one dimension. They can only fathom one dimension. And the 2D person, if they wanted to, let's say that their actual plane of existence was shaped like this. Let's say it was shaped like a almost like a folded piece of paper, right? If the 2D guy wants to go from this point to this point, he has to cross the entire thing, right? He has to go all the way across. Now, 3D man, like us, we live in a three-dimensional world. We could be like, oh, let's take a shortcut and jump across, right? We could fly between these 2 points. 2D guy would be like, what the actual, like, how did you do that? Because he has to walk all the way across. So the same way that if you keep going up levels or down levels, people like lose the ability to fathom what is happening. The one-dimensional person cannot fathom the two-dimensional object. The two-dimensional person cannot fathom a three-dimensional person. That concept is basically what object-oriented ontology applies. It applies that idea of not fully understanding something and applies it to everything. What if every single observable object or thing in the universe has its own independent existence and reality? And what if what we are seeing right now currently, what if this isn't exactly what it is? What if this material isn't really what I think it is? Like, I can only make sense of the objects around me because of my senses. I can only feel, touch, smell, and look at these things, right? But what if that's limiting me? What if these senses are limiting my ability to fully understand these objects? Kind of like how your dogs can't see certain colors, they're having their own entirely separate, unique experience of life each day. What if objects also experience that? OOO suggests that humans will never be able to fully grasp the entire essence of any given object. We will always not know something about any object because of our limited senses to our specific, unique world experience. In reality, everything in the known universe has its own entirely separate experience in life, and that's perfectly okay. Believers and proponents of this theory think that we should appreciate and celebrate the idea that everything contains and preserves its own individuality. At least that's what I've gathered from all of these sources that I read up on about object-oriented ontology. And hopefully that was a good enough explanation to end today's video on, which reminds me we are at the end of today's video. So really quickly, if you saw this bag earlier, this bag is from Makeship. I just wanted to give a short shout out. I didn't really want to do a little, oh my god, why have the colors changed so much? What the heck? I didn't want to do like a small ad read for this on the Conspiracy Iceberg like during like the beginning or anything, because I mean it's not really related. I know that some people probably watch my iceberg videos without watching the Disturbing Media stuff, but again, if you haven't gotten this, please go get this. This is a small little plushie of a VHS tape that I'm just gonna be showing it more often throughout the channel until the campaign ends. But it took a lot of effort to get this made. I made this design myself. It came out awesome. I literally cannot stop smiling looking at this thing, dude. But yeah, it's super cool. Full transparency. If you buy one of these, it's around like 38 bucks. That includes shipping though. It's 30 bucks plus like $8 shipping or something. And we have to sell around, for everyone to get their plushie, we've sold around 36 as of recording this video. For everyone to get them, we have to hit 200 sales or more, or else this won't get funded. And essentially the reason for that is because if the company that's making these for me doesn't sell 200, they won't even break even, and these are made to order, so they want to at least break even before sending these out. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up for everyone. If you haven't gotten these, please do so. It would really make everyone that's already ordered one so happy. I really just want everyone to get one of these, dude. Like, I don't even care about like what I'm gonna make off these. I'm not making like that much off of these. I'm making like, I think it's like 10% off of every sale, if that. I wouldn't even make, even if we funded, I'd probably make like maybe 500 bucks or something. But I really want everyone to get one of these, dude. Like it's the first piece of merch that I'm just so proud of, and it came out great. I really do love it. So if you haven't already, please go and check that out. It would really mean a lot to me, and just everyone else that's already ordered these. Again, not necessary though. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm not gonna come to your house and force you to do it. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's move on to the patron shout out. Thank you so much to my tier 3 patrons. I'm gonna be honest, I feel like I'm just so, I don't know, it's just so crazy that people are supporting me on like all these different platforms and stuff, and it's really motivating me to keep making stuff. I have so many other videos planned. You guys are already kind of seeing that. I uploaded like already like twice in the last like 2 weeks. Yeah, I am so pumped right now. And it's thanks to mostly the Patreon members and everyone that just watches my videos. You guys are just so amazing. Even if you're not on screen, even if you're like tier 2 or tier 1, just thank you. Like, you guys are getting like exclusive access. I'm trying to do my best to give you guys exclusive things to watch and enjoy while I'm not making content. So I just hope I'm doing my job. I'm doing my part. Yeah, I love every single one of you, and I'm just happy with how life has been going lately. To kind of cut back on the patron shout out thing, just a heart to heart really quick with everyone. Life's been great, and I hope that everyone that's watching this gets to achieve their dreams like I am currently right now. You guys are watching me literally do what I want to do in life, and God, it's been so crazy. I'm at a loss for words. But yeah, with that out of the way, I'll just end today's video. Thank you to everyone for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.